So today we'll be talking about the differences of becoming a product manager versus a UX designer. Base your vote will be, I guess, focusing on the top two topics. And you have time, we can talk about if you should become a PM. And nobody nobody is as interested in knowing the day to day. Fair enough. And then some people are interested in knowing the tips of pursuing a PM career. And I do want to kind of save some time uh, in case there's any question. Um, you can kind of ping in the chat or use Sigma Jam to add sticky notes. Yes, please add the fun memes. It's a jam session. We want to keep it fun. Excellent, excellent. So let's do a quick intro. So again, I am Eva Li. So my background I used to be a UX designer. I worked at a startup, corporate like SAP, growth startup like Procurify, which is based in Vancouver, Canada. And then later on, I kind of want to switch my career into product. One of the motivation is that I was really curious of the bigger picture, the business side of things, because when you're a designer, you're much more focusing on crafting the solution, understanding the user pain point. But I was also very curious why business prioritize certain user pain point versus the other. That's what got me interested in product. And eventually I became a product owner and then moved into a product manager role. And if you see this lovely picture in the board, this is Jarrell. Jarrell and I work in the same team. It's been a pleasure working with him with all his lovely photos. So because I can't see you with this conference tool, I would encourage you copy and paste your profile picture here. And if you don't want to show a picture, uh, paste your favorite avatar here and paste your LinkedIn or whatever social media handle you want to share. I want to us be able to connect with each other, especially we don't really see anyone else in this COVID day. Yeah, let's jam. And I think it has some cool stamp or stickers with this Figma jam. I see that Jarrell's getting a lot of attention. I would love to see other people's pictures as well. Very cool. We're not gonna move on if I just see Jarrell's face, okay? Nice. Yes. Paste your profile picture, put your name, any social media handle you want to share. You've got all nice pictures. Hello, Doris. Nice to see you here again. Very cool. Very cool. I actually have a doggy at home. He's not here right now, but I love doggy. Yay, I'm seeing more pictures. That's awesome. Which link can you use to access the work? Good question. Let me send you the link one more time. Here you go. Let me know if you have a problem. I think you may need a Figma account. It's actually pretty cool. Okay, I'm liking Figma board. It's pretty smooth. I've never tested with more than 10 people, so this is pretty cool. So you may continue pasting your awesome profile picture, but let's get started. You're here to hear what differences really are. I included a meme. You may have seen this before already. What the customer really wanted, as how customer explain it, they may have a hard time, really telling you what they want, and then other people may interpret it differently. The fun one is like how salespeople, oops, I need to lock all my stuff. how salespeople may describe it as like a roller coaster, and in the end, they just wanted something really simple. I thought it's a pretty good example of what a PM's job is. It's really to understand users' pain point, working with engineering team, sales team, making sure we're at the sweet spot, essentially delivering value to customers. And let's just move on to the next board. If you have any cool meme you want to copy and paste, feel free to do so. But let's get down to the nitty gritty of what we actually do. There's lots of definition online on what a product manager really does, but there's one, I guess, story or analogy that I really like, which is kind of thinking about the product team as, going to a spaceship where we have a goal. There's a destination we want to get to, and the destination in our context is, we want to solve user problem. But when we try to navigate in between, how we want to solve user problems, there are a lot of obstacles in between, distraction, noise. Sometimes you may miss the target, as what it illustrates here. There's the real goal, the real place where users' problem will be addressed, versus there'll be other places that we think this is what user want, but that's not essentially the case. So you may miss, whoops, but what I want to emphasize is, a PM's job isn't like to do everything. It's always in the team setting, working with everyone. Our responsibility is essentially establishing that vision and guiding the team towards that destination. So it's pretty vague, but I will kind of explain in a little bit detail later. And as we're working with the team, we are on this spaceship together, such as with the designer, like Jarrell, and with the developers, and support many other stakeholders in this spaceship. And there, in between, there's some market signal or user signals, user telling you stuff that, hey, this is not actually what I want. So our goal is to make sure that we listen to those signals, that we dodge those obstacles, or else you may crash, or you just wasted your resources. So this is kind of the story, the analogy that I like to use, that we are working as a team, and the PM's responsibility is really to guide the entire crew to the correct destination, which is the goal. And then if you're looking at this cool image right here, where we are working with a lot of constraints. A PM's job is also to prioritize their resources, making sure that we are, maximize our resources, maximizing the way that we can deliver value, because we don't have unlimited resources, unlimited money and time. So like, how can we get something really useful to users' hand as quick as possible? So when designers are proposing cool ideas, like great user experience, a lot of time what PM's thinking is value versus effort, like how much resources does that take? Does that make sense if the clients need to wait for the entire year to get something really awesome? Or does that make sense to just, build something bare bone, or what we call the MVP version, minimal viable product, in 2 weeks time, so that client can use it? So you have to think about, what's the, I guess, pros and cons. Yes, Jarrell, low effort, high value is what we usually call the, do it right away category, because that's where we're thinking about user value. Because at the end of the day, our team, the whole product team, should be thinking about how we can deliver value to users as quick as possible. And a lot of time, if we kind of propose thinking about the grand feature, you may be kind of falling into the trap of what we call the waterfall, doing a lot of work upfront. But a lot of time, we don't actually know what user want. And sometimes users don't know what they want until they have something to play with. For example, now we're playing with Figma Jam. I'm sure you have feedback on how you can improve, what you like, what you don't like. That's why we want to push things out early, and so that we can have that learning much quicker. So again, PM's job is kind of like the mission control. It cannot survive. PM cannot survive without the product team. So we kind of more in the state that trying to guide the team to get to the destination. So I've emphasized the crew a lot. So the main differences between PM and UX designers. The first point is kind of, you probably have heard like the T-shaped person. I would think of a UX designer is pretty deep in the, I guess, the vertical side, because you're really great at, designing, user research, prototyping, testing. That's kind of the vertical that you're looking at. You're very good at design vertical. versus what is this dogi shaped? That's a complex shape. That's a very comprehensive shape. Versus a PM, I would think of us as more a generalist. Our breadth is much broader than designer because we essentially have to coordinate with all of different stakeholders, developers, designers, but we're not necessarily designers or developers ourselves. But we need to be able to work with all these different stakeholders, gather little information or as much as information we can, and be able to make a decision. What can we do to deliver value? So our breadth is a lot broader, but we're kind of generalist because we're not specialized in everything. So that's kind of the T-shaped thing. And then if you look at the second picture here, project A, project B, we don't want to kind of be super skewed to one area than the other. But then different product manager may be good at different things. So you may see, I think now we have like technical product manager out there or some other title that you may have seen. Honestly, in the industry, there's no like standard. It's really depending on the product itself. If you're crafting a product where the target audience are all engineers, it kind of makes sense to hire a technical product manager because they already understand the technical bits. Which shape is that? I will click that later. But versus maybe there's other B2C product that really require you to have that user empathy, have very good UX because the tolerance from user for B2C product, they have high expectation of the usability. So they may be looking for a product manager with stronger design background. So in short, there's no like right or wrong answer. It really depends on what the company is looking for, and they recruit the different skill based on the gap in their team. Now we talk about kind of the shape. Maybe the dogi shape is cool. What the difference between UX designer versus PM is that UX designer, you kind of are in the phase where you're in the launch phase or the problem solution phase. You're trying to come up with really great solutions through prototyping. Oh, hello. And other bits to try to solve user problem. But again, as a product manager, you're looking at the problem at a broader sense. You're not just looking at the solutioning space. You're working with the designer to identify the problems. And once you identify the problem, you need to kind of look at, there's probably a bunch of problems you can solve. Which one should you solve and why? And then you have to make sense from an resource perspective, from a user's perspective, is it desirable? And from a business perspective, does that make money? Because you are essentially carrying the team, right? Because if we run out of money and there's nothing we can do, we can't deliver value to user anymore. So this is kind of like a diagram I stole from the internet. If you kind of search up, you will see other diagram. But we kind of had to think about how we talk to user about it, which is the marketing piece. We have to understand, does user get what we're trying to solve? If they don't even understand what our product does, how would they even get to the point where they're actually using it? And then the distribution bit is like adoption. How would it growing? What other pieces should we scale? And what customer interact with? Where is really your domain, talking to customers, solving their problems through prototypes, and how can we enable it, which is like the actual implementation piece, and then what it means for the company, like support, pricing, there's all other aspects. So again, going back to the T-shaped part, product manager have to think about more components, but we're not like specialized in everyone. Obviously, some PMs can be really deep in some vertical versus others. That's why you may see titles like product manager, growth product manager, or product manager dash pricing, because there's just too much to do. And give you kind of like a nicer illustration. Obviously, this one does not capture everything. But if you think about like a junior product manager, they may be really busy with coming up with feature specs. When we say feature, I cringe every time when I say feature, but it's just a quicker way of saying, the way we want to solve problem, that we want to write our user stories, requirements, so that it's clear for the development team what to do. And then they also tap into like market research, competitor analysis, or doing A/B testing, working with the designers to validate their solution. That's kind of what maybe more junior product manager will be busy with, more like the day-to-day short-term execution. But if you're looking more like mid-level, senior product manager, they are kind of looking things more holistically. They're looking at the roadmap where they can make the highest impact, and also coming up with a strategy. They no longer just like look at what the next best thing could be. They're looking at the long-term picture. So for like ADP list, if I'm a PM more on the junior side, then I may be responsible on like how can we optimize this group session so that when the mentor change the calendar link, that the mentee don't receive two calendar invites to avoid that confusion. That's more the short-term execution. But for more experienced PM, or they may be thinking about the long term, how can we get more adoption in a broader sense? How can we be able to scale the platform? So they no longer just look at individual feature. They look at like, should that be invested in the group session, or should that be like the general booking, or some other cool things that could build into increase engagement? And then when we talk about engagement, then they probably have to go ahead and define what engagement matters for the company. So that's kind of like a very quick overview on like maybe the differences between junior and versus more senior PM. Oh, nice. This is BTS, right? I hope I got it right. So yeah, so if you're more senior PM, you may be like, I got it right, yes. You may be like managing different product or different feature lines. So like your interaction with people will increase. That's kind of like the main difference between a designer and PM, because if we move to the next chart, again, I stole all this illustration from the internet. A designer, you may be interacting with the user and also the development team. And the product manager, you basically have to talk to everyone, making sure, because communication and alignment is such a big deal. So you'd be talking to support, sales, I don't know, anybody you never thought you have to talk to, and all of a sudden you will have to talk to them. So I think before I jump into product management career path, that wasn't something I expected, because your day-to-day, if you go to the second chart, you really are packed with meetings. I know people may be like sharing on social media, exaggerate a little bit about the meeting. I had back-to-back meetings all day. How's that possible? I thought that it's exaggerated. I'm not gonna do that when I become a PM. But sometimes it depends on the day. Sometimes you really can have meeting from 9 o'clock to 5 p.m. or even worse, back-to-back meeting. That's something I have to adjust. Obviously, you can have better time management and more better time dedication. But sometimes it just happens because a lot of time PMs are kind of on the front line. If there's emerging work, ad hoc request, you kind of have to solve it right away, which brings me to the third picture. As like, if you're a designer, you're given a task, you do like the whole design sprint, defining the problem, coming up with solution, testing. It's not a linear process, but you have a process to follow. You can check off your list pretty, in a linear way almost. But for PM, our day-to-day priority task changes all the time. Sometimes it's just not even worth doing a to-do list. I am a person who loves to-do list, but it doesn't work anymore. I just keep scrapping things as I go, because there are different things coming in. I feel like managing a to-do list is actually more work. So you kind of just have to learn how to prioritize these tasks in your head, like what's more important. And again, learning delegation, really empowering your team so that you don't have to be that contact person anymore. Maybe they can work with the designer directly or directly to the developers. Do you have to do, there's a question. Yeah, feel free to jump in the chat if you have questions. Do you have to do a lot of babysitting to do like a project manager? That's a good question. I would say it depends. For our newer team, for example, currently we ramp up a lot of new engineers. There is a bit of so-called babysitting. Maybe babysitting is not a good word, because my designer Jarrell's here. It's more like just knowledge share. They're sitting, yes. So more knowledge share, like communicating how user use the product from a business sense. Especially we are working on an enterprise product. It's really hard to get that empathy when it's not really a product that you could use. Our target audience are like what we call investment planner. I'm like, what are they exactly? What are they? So we have to communicate what those people are. They're very niche market, from the general audience. It's not like Facebook. Okay, I get it. I could just kind of try it out myself. Isn't that type of software or product? And for a lot of you, you probably are working into a B2B software company as well. So the user may not be you cannot be you put yourself into user's shoe as easily as possible. So yes, I would say there's a bit of babysitting, icons only. Yes, and I guess other type of babysitting is depends on your role. Some product manager are more internal facing, meaning they work with the development team on a daily basis. Myself are kind of split into two. So I also help with the team with their Scrum process or whatever framework they want to use, but our team uses Scrum, so we attend Scrum ceremony, grooming the tickets for the team, and etc. And then if we scroll down, nice, I love the stickies, guys. So, or folks, sorry. Where a designer, you may be working on your design specs, again, product managers just kind of work on a bunch of things, which is tied to like our day-to-day really changes. Sometimes I also don't know how people manage this kind of 1,000 things you have to do. I've also seen product managers kind of just do it when it becomes important. They give them a to-do list. But essentially, I think it's also important to come up with your own process and system for how to manage. It's like your task itself is kind of a design challenge. How can you deal with all this? Have a process to address all that. And Amanda has a question. Going back to your weekly calendar example, do UX designers typically not need to attend daily stand-up? Are they involved in sprint? That's a great question. I think Joel actually has, we're setting something up to talk about how UX designer can be embedded in Scrum or dual track. You can advertise a little bit, Joel. But to answer your question, yes, they should be in an ideal development world. Designers should be embedded in the Scrum meeting, or if you're not using Scrum, you can be other things, because you want the designer to work with the engineers. Because if they're separated, like a designer just work on the solution on their own, and then, hey, I'm done. I did some user testing here. Engineers, go build this. If you think about it, it's kind of like a waterfall process. There's no like way for the two to really jam together, because really the innovation happen is when engineer, the designer, and a business person are in the same room coming up with awesome solutions. You're hungry to learn. Yeah, stay tuned for Jarrell's next sessions at some point. Hopefully that answers your question. So in short, yes, designers should be attending daily stand-up if possible. If you're not doing that today, I encourage to poke your PM or whoever is leading the team, Yes, shameless plug. No, I'm plugging it for Jarrell, so it doesn't really count. So yeah, I really encourage you to really attend those daily stand-up. I know at first it's like really daunting, like you had maybe not really a clue what developers are talking about. But again, if you attend these more frequently, I think you can grasp the pattern, the concerns that they are talking about. So when you're designing in the future, you kind of have a sense, developers may be thinking about this constraint, they may be thinking about validation, what kind of error messages do I need to populate? I think it's actually really, really important for designer to attend those stand-up. Does it make sense for PMs to have UX design skills, or are UX sensibilities just valuable to be impactful as a PM? So that's kind of going back to what the company needs. I'm biased. I came from a UX design background. I do think UX design skill is essential for all the PMs. In fact, I think if you see those charts, there's like the engineer pie, there's the design, and there's like the business sense. And design is really essential because just like how PMs need to work with engineers, we need to have some technical understanding so we can communicate to the engineers. Same for design. So you need to have some UX understanding so that you can work with designers. And also, especially if you're working with more junior designers, that they may not have all the tools or, figuring out what the process should be. So again, you'll be able to have that UX knowledge to kind of ramp up the designer. But obviously, our star designer, Jarrell, does not need a lot of hand holding. And PM really appreciate when designer can kind of take initiative to do their research, leading the whole design process themselves. On the other side of the coin, should UX folks have PM skill? I'm building a side project. Where do I learn more PM skill? Yeah, that's a good question. I think definitely yes, especially if you've seen the industry or you look at the history of UX designer. We were called graphic designer, and then we advanced to web designer, and then we are UI designer or UX designer, and you're seeing more titles like product designer. I think the expectation from design is getting higher and higher. It's also because the crafting of the solution piece, back in the days, I don't know if any of you use Flash to prototype things. I came from that type of time. So that was a desired skill set because it was kind of hard to prototype things. But with Figma, with InVision, I don't know what other tools are out there. Prototyping is actually becoming, much easier than before. That's why the expectation is also much higher. We expect designers to actually be able to understand the business. Because if you think about it, if you understand a business, if you know how to craft solution, that makes you a way better designer than some of your other colleagues that may not understand the business bit. Flash, oh yes, see, we're from the same generation. How do I validate ideas for my side project? So I think it depends on what validation you. Yes, or you just message me. You don't need to book me. Maybe we can chat offline. But I think it really depends on what kind of validation. What are the goals for your side project? Without knowing the goals, it's really hard to say how you want to validate that. But we can chat more. Where are we? Whoa, here. And then from a day-to-day conversation, I also noticed this is kind of difference between designers and product manager. As a designer, you want to kind of jam on the ideas. There's a trick you can say, when you're in a brainstorming session, you say like, yes, and, so that, you can continue building on top of ideas from each other. For product manager, we should, obviously, if we're in an ideation session, we'll say yes, and, but a lot of time we have to learn how to say no. That's also one of the hardest things I have to do because unfortunately I'm a pleaser myself. But in order to protect my team without, taking a lot of work, I have to say no because blah, 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 blah. And one trick, if you're interested, even for designing, if your team is giving you a lot of work, you have to learn how to say no as well. One tip I will share is like, if it's hard for you to say no, just like give them all your work, a list of your tasks. Let them prioritize for you so that they understand what you are working on. And also they understand if you're not able to work on what they want you to work on. It's clear to them, okay, because you're working on something else. And yes, those things are more important. I just say no to everything. Then you have a great potential to become a PM. But yes, stakeholder management is definitely something I have to learn when I became a PM because I was really uncomfortable. I was insecure. When you go in a meeting, everybody wants something, and you can't actually do everything they say. And a lot of the time, they actually have conflicting requests. If you do one, you'll disappoint the other one. I had to learn it's not really about disappointing one person in the room or anything. You have to get back to the foundation, thinking about for the business, for the users, what makes sense for the people. But this is something I have to consciously train myself. Any other question? That's like kind of like cool images that I found from this slang. Like take a read. I really enjoy it. Game over. And any other question about the differences before we move on, like what we're looking for from a UX designer? Ooh, question. You had experience as a PO. Does being a CSM or CSPO help you work more effectively? Definitely. If you're working with the Scrum framework, so CSM, remind me what the acronym is. I can't win. CSM is Customer Success Manager. And then CSPO is, I got it all wrong. It's Certified Scrum Master. Actually, I did take the CSPO. I never took the Certified Scrum Master course, but I've heard good things about it. So for those who who don't know like what Scrum Master do. So in a Scrum team, usually there's a dedicated Scrum Master who's responsible is to coordinate with the team, making sure everything, the user stories are groomed, optimized for the developers so that developers and designers can kind of focus on what they do. Their job is actually much harder than how I described it. Yes, I like that. And dealing with conflict, they may facilitate retrospective and protect them. Thank you, thank you. And I would say definitely yes. I have taken the PO course. That gives you a good idea what the Scrum, I guess, framework could look like. So for those who's not very familiar or have nothing, I'm a UX designer, I didn't know all this stuff. Definitely recommend to take those courses. Some of them are even free online, or you can obviously get the certified one because I think most POs or PM have taken the same course. So that's really helpful when you're talking to other PMs. You have the same kind of same language that you can play off already. And then Amanda said, do you find being a PM to be a lot more pressure sometimes? For example, a lot of responsibility. Totally. I think that's also the kind of the difference. When I was a UX designer, I kind of was able to hide in my corner, do my own work, schedule my day. For days I don't feel productive, I know I'm not productive. It's okay to have a bad day. Versus PM, everything's kind of shuffled to your face, especially at the early transition of my career. So I would say it's more, I was think there are a bit more pressure, especially requests are coming in from different directions. Your dev team may be blocked by you because you didn't clarify some requirement, or your designers are blocked by you because you didn't explain or use how user or the business want to use it. There's a bit of pressure, but I would say like, for me, it's more rewarding. I know it's more work, more stress, but I never regret transitioning into product management realm. I just find that also very rewarding. If you're someone who's interested in making, I guess, bigger scale impact, not saying designers are not, because they're very, very important. But if you're someone want to like look at the bigger picture, have you influence on where the crew should be heading to. But obviously, if you make the wrong call, the pressure is a lot bigger than coming up with a solution that is optimal. Yes, share resources in the email. Yes, we could do that. There's another comment. I see Agile or Scrum on job post a lot for UX designer position. I never knew what that meant or how to get experience doing that. Can you elaborate? Like Scrum job post for a lot for UX designers, so that's a requirement for UX designer jobs? Oh, I think they just, because again, when I was in school, nobody taught me Agile development or Scrum. But essentially, when you come out from school, you know that you're always working with a product team, with a development team. So if I understood the question correctly, it may be one of the requirements in a lot of the UX design job position, because what we're looking for is like, I want to understand if you as a designer, if you're great at crafting your work, but can you work with other people? Because it's no longer about crafting the perfect work. It's about if you can work with the rest of the team, the engineers, to ship the product. If the solution isn't in user's hand, in a sense, you actually haven't delivered value to user. You just have a really great prototype. So we're looking at if people can work with engineers, can communicate with them. I think that's why they put it in there. In interviews, they ask about how you work in Agile and how you can fit in Agile environment. How do you? And then we may have to. That might need a bit more time, but essentially that ties back to the other question. We want to understand you as a designer. Have you worked with other developers? How do you interact with them? If the developers say, I can't do it, we want to understand what you would do at that point. Would you just like, what? Or would you like ask questions like, why? And why can't you do it? And then the developer says something, oh, because it's really hard. Then we want to see like, oh, then you may want to dig deeper, just like how you do user research. And we want to understand if you're familiar with Scrum, because if you're not familiar with Scrum, meaning we have to train you. So going back, it would be nice if you as a designer understand these frameworks. So we don't have to do as much babysitting as much. And say for developers as well, we want them to understand the Agile framework. how does a PM deal with ambiguity and uncertainty, and how is priority managed across cross-functional groups? There's different frameworks, like you can use like risk versus impact, and you can put it in like the 4 category, the 4 quadrants. But honestly, it's by experience, or you've seen some more sophisticated scoring system with tools like AHA. You'll be able to score, is this thing have a lot of high risk? What's the impact? What's the effort? But a lot of times, estimating those is also very time consuming. So depending on what you're working on, if you're working on big initiatives, you definitely should do that. But if it's just like a decision, you or your team can make, like one of the fine-grained requirement from one of the user story, then they can probably deal it with themselves. I work with dev teams. I'm sorry if I missed some question. Actually, I think I missed one question. I'm going to try to answer as much as I could, but if I don't get back to you, just like message on ADP List Slack. Maybe we can make a good chat. Okay, thank you for the advertisement. Just shoot me a message. But I do want to get to the third topic, or because it's one of the top voted one. So I'm sorry, I'm just going to move on, but save your questions in Slack or message me on LinkedIn. Oh, nice. Some people already copy and paste a really nice diagram. So what PMs are looking for from a UX designer? Obviously, there are a lot of things, but I only put on 3 things I want you to take away from this session. The first one is design leadership. I know, very vague, but essentially what it means is that we're looking for designers who can lead the UX research, help us from the beginning, kind of bring us to end-to-end process. We want to do as less kind of babysitting work as possible, but this requires kind of the second point. The UX designer need to have deep understanding of the users and product. From my past experience, somewhat junior designers, they're learning the product and user, and also learning how to work with designers. And in a design meeting, the engineer says something, oh, we should do this, this, this. Then we see a lot of junior designer would basically paint the picture that other people say are describing. So in a sense, it's kind of sad. You're not just a tool to produce prototypes, right? You're here to design. You're here to solve user problem through the medium of prototyping. So so thank you, Jarrell. So when we talk about design leadership, we're looking at, your skill set. Can you facilitate sessions? If someone kind of say no to you, how do you react? How, it's not even about reacting, but how do you dig deeper about their concern? It's no longer just about the user. Sometimes you need to get engineers buy-in as well. There's a lot of soft skill involved. And if you're kind of looking at the next level, design leadership, after you kind of master how you work with your immediate development team, you maybe want to look at how other teams are operating, how you can include or introduce a new design process so that people's mindset towards design actually change. So for example, at Copperleaf, design wasn't really valued because old-fashioned way we're thinking about design, okay, just putting lipstick on a pig. But our design director Ian has been pushing and educating design internally. So he's pushing like design thinking, onboarding process, making sure all the new hires are taking that training. Yes, Ian, what is it? You always do that. You want to influence the rest of your company. So this is kind of where design leadership comes in. And deep understanding of users and product. I think this really is one of the quality that I like to see more from designers. I think the technical aspect is tough when you're encountering something you don't know really well. So I guess what we're looking for, like if you don't know something, what's the next step? How can you figure that out? And I think myself included, sometimes I don't know something, like, oh, I don't want to talk about it because I don't know it really well. But that's kind of like a vicious cycle. If you don't know it well, you don't do anything to improve that knowledge. How can you really craft a solution that user want? So this is tough. The second part, I know the sentence itself sounds really easy, but getting to a point you truly, truly have the empathy from user, it's very hard. It takes time and it takes passion as well. You need to be curious to do so. It's really tough. Oh, nice. Yeah, put on stage, you will have other wisdom to share. please do so. And then the third sticky note I want to kind of share is like, if you're a more junior designer, when you talk about portfolio, you always want to have something cool to show, cool UI, the most trending UI, or like animated prototype or whatever. Those are important too. But again, when you work in the industry, you realize that 20% of what designers do is about crafting the prototype, which is like the end result. But big part of the work, the value the designer bring isn't the prototype. It's about delivering value to users. And for designer, delivering users, I just went off the 80-20 rule. But yeah, essentially the key takeaway is like a lot of the values that designer provide are through defining the problem, understanding user pain point, working with the engineers so that we don't build features that we shouldn't build. There's a fun example, Gerard, if you don't, I'm going to share. You actually have no chance to object. That Gerard's working on a lot on what is it called? The discovery work. So he's actually talking to engineers and stakeholders. But through these interviews, there's a lot of pushback and back and forth. At times, he may feel like, oh my God, I'm not producing because I had no tangible artifact. I had no tangible prototype or wireframe to show that I produce values. So then I want to kind of remind all the designers, a lot of your value isn't just through the tangible artifact. It's about guiding the crew to the right goal, the destination. And sometimes that means that we need to say no to certain features or certain things that we shouldn't build. Because a lot of times you give engineer a problem, then they think of all the ways that they could probably possible solve it. But sometimes maybe that problem isn't what we need to go after. So again, that's kind of where the 80% is intangible values that you offer to the team. Whoa, that was a lot of talking from my side. Next time, I would love to use Zoom so that I can get one of you to talk on stage. But hopefully you have fun. Let's see. Is there other topic you want me to cover? I mean, I prepared a few things. Actually, you know what? I'm going to put in another fun thing. Oh, actually, sorry. Is there anyone from this chat actually interested in pursuing the product management career? I was just wondering if we should move on to this part or the last bit or just do networking. Oh yeah, put your cool networking stuff here so I can send it all to the rest of the group later. Ooh, I see a lot of yes. Cool. Oh, that's awesome. I love to see more designer, go into the product route. Traditionally, I think there are a lot of engineers, ex-engineers who became a PM. But I think we're seeing more like design background or like business analysts or even support customer service folks. But yeah, tell me why you want to become a PM or some of your hesitation of going into this path so that I can better understand. I hate meetings. I feel you. Unfortunately, yeah, PMs, I don't know if there's a way to avoid meetings because our job is kind of like aligning goals, setting up the vision, guiding the crew. That means communication. So you can find other ways to communicate without having meetings. I would love to learn, but so far meetings are still most effective way when you need to communicate something because when we talk about communication, a lot of times it's actually listening, listening what the other people are concerned about so that you can dig out this stuff and address their concern. I'll be concerned. If you're a great PM at some point, you don't actually need to do a lot of babysitting. The best PM or best PO I've seen is that they do a lot of work, grooming them, empowering them. And at some point, the team can run without the PO. That's like the ultimate goal, that the team doesn't need you, then you're doing really good job. If the team needs you every day, then you might want to think, what you're doing wrong, like what areas you're just kind of trying to have too much control. You want to be as hands-off in a way that they can run the team themselves without you. Question, what do you do when things go wrong, not meeting a deadline, shifting requirement? That happens all the time. Again, goes back to communication, setting expectations to stakeholders. Sometimes we're really hesitant to tell stakeholders a deadline. Usually we just say, we're going to start, this is the next most important thing we're going to work on, without a definite deadline. But sometimes they request a deadline, then you just do a range, and then you just don't meet the deadline. You just communicate why, because there are probably good reasons why you're delayed. Let's see. Tons of meetings. People are really scared of meetings. It's not too bad, it takes the time to adjust, but I was able to kind of downsize, have my day, have no meetings at some point. But at the beginning, it's definitely more a transition. Yeah, we should do like a design jam on how to deal with this problem. PM shouldn't have so many meetings. How can we optimize communication without setting a lot of meetings? One of the pain point my designer Joel has is scheduling. He can never book a time where all the stakeholders are available. Oh, I would love to hear how we can solve that problem too. No experience in PMing, still in the beginning of design career. Fair enough. It's actually kind of hard to bring into PM career because they always look for someone who have direct product manager experience. But again, it's like chicken and egg problem. But you don't give opportunity to the I guess the people who don't have experience. How can we have experience? But since you're already in the design industry, you actually have a bit of advantage because you're exposed to agile development, working with developers, and because one of the verticals of a PM's requirement is the design aspect, so you actually have more advantage than you think. I know we all hate meetings. I'm an introvert myself. Sometimes just really draining, but you gotta find joy in what you do. Crack a joke with people you love working with. Let's see, what was the most difficult thing? Technical gaps, anticipate risk. Yeah, totally valid. Should PMs have a computer science background? I think there's no right or wrong answer. Some of them can. It's like, should you have a design background? You don't need to graduate as a designer, but obviously, because you work with engineers on a daily basis, it's nice that you know how to speak their language, know about the queries and stuff. When I transitioned, because I was a designer, I was actually having a really hard time catching up on the technical bits. I was like, I did front-end development before. I even coded PHP for WordPress website before. This shouldn't be a problem. But little did I know that was actually way more challenging than that. There's a lot more nuance, when we talk about validation with directing URL. I know. That's definitely a bit to catch up, but it's not impossible, because essentially we don't have to know how to code. I've learned, when you don't know something, you just kind of ask. If they throw in like a really technical term, it's kind of the same trick you use in user research. When you don't know something, you just kind of repeat what they say and kind of ask why, so that you can learn. It's not the end of the world, but I think the thing is that we may have like those imposter syndromes, like, can I say shit? Oh shit, we don't know all the technical bits. I'm so not competent. But you gotta take a step back, take a deep breath. You're not hired as a developer. You're not required to do coding. Your job is guiding the crew. But guiding the crew requires that you need to understand their job so that they can trust you as well. Okay, I'm gonna wrap up with one last question. Do you have any suggestion on how to exercise PM mindset to think more strategic? And yes, I love that the fact that you're asking this question, you're already thinking about it. So I would encourage you, ex designer, if you're not used to like thinking about the strategic goal, when you're working on a design task, you want to also think about what's the design outcome. Thinking about metrics. It's no longer, hey, I want to be able to, the success rate of clicking this button is like 90%. Think deeper, like why do we need to click this button? That may lead to other problem like, because we need to generate more revenue for the company and etc. Try to dig deeper and kind of use your design task as your playing ground. Working with your PM, maybe you can help establish some of these metrics with your PM. That could be maybe more design focused. That's totally fine. Maybe tracking how much time they complete a certain task, but start thinking about it. Let's see how much time we have. Transition from UX design. Yeah, maybe we can have another session if people are interested. But I know we are kind of running out of time. One last thing I want to get us is like connect with each other. So another shameless plug here. Jarrell's running the Vancouver Design Check-in. I believe he welcomes designers, even though if you may not be from Vancouver, Canada. Join this awesome community. It's very chill, a very safe place to share ideas and stuff. Um, and then if there's any, this is not BTS. Yeah, copy and paste your profile, LinkedIn. I'll add all of you, or please add me as well, so that we can be connected. Maybe we can even have a chat about the product career path in more detail. This is kind of my trial. I wasn't expecting so many people. I was expecting like 10, 20 people, so we can just like have a small group. But if you're interested in more, definitely share your social handle here and join all the cool community, the Slack community. Okay. We're almost towards the end. Again, if you have questions, shoot me a message on LinkedIn or through ADP's list Slack. I'll try my best to answer your questions. But we're gonna wrap up now because one of the things PM has to do is making sure our meetings end on time. But sometimes I rush people too much. But anyways, I hope you enjoy this session. One last thing I love to get your feedback on is whether you enjoy this session or not. So you're not going to hurt my feeling. I just want to see if I were to run this kind of session, what topics people are interested. We always need to collect metrics. So a simple metrics here. Can I share my LinkedIn? Yes. Let me find my LinkedIn. And next time, let's use Zoom. I love to see your face. I love to see your voice. It's really awkward to just like talk on my own. Oh, and for the my name has a bracket in me search. Sorry if I confuse you. There's kind of another startup I was working on the side. Um, that's why it's called me search. Share that? Yes, I can share that. You don't need to be good looking. And I'm sure you're very good looking. When people say they're not good looking, that means they're extremely good looking, right? Thank you. Thank you. I hope you all enjoy it. I'll stick around for a bit, but feel free to enjoy your Friday afternoon or Saturday morning or Saturday midnight. Thank you so much for joining.